Do you believe you have true friends, people who genuinely care for you without any hidden agenda? Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychiatrist, unearthed a truth that might shake the foundation of everything you assume about relationships. Behind every seemingly sincere smile, there lies a psychological reality far more intricate and unsettling than we care to admit. Jung revealed that each of us carries hidden aspects within impulses, desires, and motivations buried so deep we hardly recognize them ourselves. We are not who we appear to be, not entirely. Every day, we step into the world wearing invisible masks, crafted not from cloth or paint, but from social expectations, unspoken rules, and our deep craving for approval. Jung called this mask the persona, and what's most disturbing is that many of us never remove it, not even in solitude. Over time, we become so identified with this mask that we begin to forget it's not truly who we are. Unlike an actor who knows when the curtain falls, we continue performing long after the stage has cleared. With colleagues, we wear the competent, agreeable face. At home, we put on the mask of unconditional love. With friends, we're the fun one, the loyal one, the understanding one. But ask yourself, how much of what you show the people closest to you is truly you? How much is filtered through this psychological armor you've been conditioned to wear? This is where the illusion of friendship begins to fracture. If you've never shown someone your true self, how can they genuinely know you? And if they don't know the real you, what exactly is the foundation of that friendship? Is it you they care for, or only the version you present? Jung warned that when the persona becomes too dominant, we risk losing touch with our authenticity. He called this condition persona inflation, a state where our identity becomes fused with our mask. In such a state, relationships devolve into subtle negotiations of expectations. They're no longer built on emotional truth, but on silent performance. Think of the person who always seems cheerful and helpful, who never complains, who is always available. Beneath that surface, what feelings have they buried? Resentment, fatigue, loneliness. These emotions don't disappear just because we don't express them. They accumulate in the shadows, waiting. And this is perhaps the most haunting insight Jung offered. The persona doesn't just deceive others, it deceives ourselves. We don't consciously decide to perform these roles. We slip into them like second skin. A mother silences her pain to appear nurturing. A leader masks his fear to appear strong. A friend hides her jealousy behind encouragement. These aren't necessarily acts of manipulation. They're often driven by unconscious defense. Yet Jung insisted that no real intimacy can exist between two personas. When two masks engage, they perform a dance of social ritual, not a meeting of souls. Real friend, cheap, honest, raw, vulnerable friendship requires what Jung called an authentic encounter. But such encounters are rare, precisely because unmasking ourselves feels dangerous. Without our personas, we fear we'll be rejected, judged, or abandoned. This is the tragedy of so many long-standing relationships. People spend years together, decades even, believing they are deeply connected, when in truth they only know each other's personas. The laughter, the tears, the shared memories, these can all be real, but still shallow if neither person has ever shown the full truth of who they are. We perform closeness, we mimic emotional depth, but deep down we remain strangers. What makes this even more tragic is that the persona isn't just meant to protect us from others. It's also a barrier we build against ourselves. Behind every bright, polished exterior lies the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The ever-smiling person doesn't confront their anger. The endlessly giving friend avoids their selfish needs. The tough leader ignores their longing for tenderness. We create personas to embody our ideal selves so we can avoid looking into the mirror of our shadow. And here lies the paradox. Unless a person is willing to see and accept their own hidden nature, they cannot truly accept it in another. They will judge in others what they have repressed in themselves. They will fear in their friends what they deny in their own hearts. So when betrayal strikes, when a friend's kindness turns out to be conditional, when motives unravel, Jung would say, it was never truly friendship to begin with. It was a dance between two masks, and in a world where few are willing to unmask themselves, genuine friendship becomes not just rare, it becomes revolutionary. Carl Jung believed that for any relationship to be truly genuine, both people must integrate the light and shadow aspects of their personalities. But in reality, most of us are so attached to the personas we've crafted, those polished versions of ourselves designed to win approval, that we expect others to do the same. These personas become a kind of unspoken social contract. I'll keep pretending if you do too. And as long as both people stay within that agreement, the relationship seems stable. But the moment someone drops the act, when they show raw emotion, anger, vulnerability, or selfishness, it can feel threatening. It disrupts the illusion both people have agreed to maintain. This is where the danger of the persona lies. It's not just a mask we wear, it's a role we become addicted to. Every time we receive validation for our performance, it reinforces the behavior. We begin to crave approval not for who we are, but for how well we play the part. Over time, this creates a deep internal split. We're celebrated for the image we project, while our true self goes unseen, unheard, and eventually unknown even to us. Jung warned that this kind of life leads to spiritual emptiness. We become emotionally hollow. Even surrounded by people, we feel alone, because the connections are built on masks interacting with other masks. They may look successful from the outside, but inside they're devoid of true intimacy. When we're constantly performing, true friendship becomes nearly impossible. We're not relating to others as they are, but to the roles they're playing. And they're not loving us, they're loving our act. It's no wonder so many relationships eventually feel empty or inauthentic, even if they began with sincerity. Jung didn't suggest we abandon social norms or politeness altogether. What he encouraged was awareness, a conscious use of the persona. Know when you're putting on the mask and choose when to take it off. The goal is not to destroy the persona, but to avoid being consumed by it. To live with integrity means staying connected to your real self, even while navigating the social world. That awareness becomes the doorway to real connection, one built on truth, not performance. But the persona is only half the picture. The other half is the shadow, the part of ourselves we try to bury, deny, or reject. Every human being has one. It's the side that carries our unwanted traits, impulses, and emotions. The things we learned were unacceptable or dangerous to show. Jung called it the shadow, and his insight was chilling. The more we deny it, the more power it holds over us, and the more it sabotages our ability to form meaningful relationships. What makes the shadow especially insidious is that it doesn't just disappear. It gets projected. We push it out onto other people, seeing in them what we refuse to see in ourselves. The person who prides themselves on being honest may also manipulate others without realizing it. The endlessly generous friend may secretly feel bitter and exploited. The relentlessly positive person might be sitting on a volcano of suppressed rage. The shadow isn't just our bad side. It includes any quality that doesn't fit our self-image, even positive ones like confidence, assertiveness, or sensuality. A person raised to always be selfless might reject their own healthy self-interest. Someone trained to be stoic might bury their need for comfort or help. The tragic part is we're often unaware this is happening. The repression is automatic, but the effects are visible, especially in how we react to others. We become most triggered by traits we're denying in ourselves. A friend who constantly criticizes others for being fake might be running from their own need for attention. Someone who lashes out at selfish people may be secretly wrestling with their own repressed selfishness. And because of these projections, we stop seeing people clearly. We react not to who they are, but to the pieces of ourselves they unknowingly mirror. Jung noticed that the shadow tends to erupt under pressure, during stress, exhaustion, or intense emotion. The person who's always kind suddenly snaps. The responsible one makes a reckless choice. The emotionally composed friend breaks down. These aren't breakdowns, they are breakthroughs, the shadow slipping past the mask. It also shows up in subtler ways, through our dreams, fantasies, obsessions, and the people we irrationally love or hate. The figures we admire or despise often reflect the parts of ourselves we haven't owned. In relationships, this creates what Jung called unconscious contracts. We're drawn to people who let us express our shadow by proxy. The good friend might live vicariously through their rebellious friend. The logical person might surround themselves with emotional people to feel something without abandoning their identity as rational. But this dynamic is not real connection. It's emotional outsourcing. We're using others as containers for the parts of ourselves we can't accept. This creates unstable, unbalanced relationships. They may appear loving or loyal, but underneath, they're transactional. We're not truly seeing the other person, we're using them. When that dynamic breaks down, when the other person refuses to play the role we've assigned them, the entire relationship often collapses. That's because it was never grounded in truth. It was built on shadow dynamics masquerading as connection. Jung believed that real friendship is only possible when we stop projecting and start integrating. When we take responsibility for the uncomfortable truths within us, we stop expecting others to carry them. We stop judging people so harshly for traits we secretly share, and we begin to see each other not through the distortions of persona and shadow, but through the lens of honesty and compassion. This kind of relationship is rare, but it's possible. It requires courage to be vulnerable, to be real, to look at ourselves without flinching, but the reward is profound, connection that feels alive, grounded, and human, not perfect, but real. Often, the shadow doesn't only contain the darker, socially condemned parts of ourselves. It also holds traits that are deeply positive, but were suppressed early in life. A person raised in a family that prized modesty might bury their natural charisma and confidence. Someone taught that intelligence was threatening might disown their sharp thinking and insight. These positive disowned parts are what Jung referred to as the golden shadow, qualities that represent our hidden potential. Yet by denying them, people experience a quiet sense of inadequacy and incompleteness that affects every relationship they form. The shadow also includes more primal elements, our instincts for power, sex, aggression, and survival. Society teaches us to suppress these urges in the name of civility, but suppression doesn't mean elimination. These raw drives go underground, where they influence behavior in ways we don't recognize. Someone who denies their anger may not feel angry, yet they act out through passive-aggressive behavior or form relationships with openly aggressive people. The drive remains, it simply finds a backdoor. What makes this dynamic particularly destructive is how it affects intimacy. True closeness requires what Jung called shadow integration, the courage to acknowledge and accept the full spectrum of who we are. But most people are so committed to their idealized self-image that they can't tolerate the vulnerability that real connection demands. They show only their good parts, hiding everything that feels flawed or dangerous. They fear that if someone saw their darker or more complicated side, they'd be rejected. At the same time, they unconsciously expect others to do the same, to present a filtered, curated version of themselves. This mutual pretense turns relationships into performances. Shadow work, recognizing, accepting, and integrating the rejected parts of ourselves, is essential to healing this split. It doesn't mean indulging every dark impulse or abandoning morality. It means developing awareness of our inner contradictions and choosing to live from a place of wholeness, not fragmentation. It means relating to others not as characters in a carefully managed performance, but as equally complex, contradictory beings. This awareness is rare, but it's the foundation of authenticity. The shadow also explains why so many friendships break down during crises or transitions. Stress weakens our defenses, and the shadow slips through. The friend who always seemed supportive might become judgmental when we're struggling. The person we thought of as steady and self-reliant might turn emotionally dependent under pressure. These aren't failures. They're revelations of the full self that was always there, just hidden behind the mask. Understanding the shadow helps us make sense of these moments and respond with compassion rather than confusion or resentment. What Jung uncovered is that deep, lasting friendship isn't easy because it demands self-awareness, humility, and maturity. It requires us to tolerate the discomfort of our own flaws and the imperfections of others. Most people never learn to do this. They cling to the safety of their persona and reject what doesn't fit. But until we face and reclaim the parts of ourselves we've disowned, our relationships remain hollow, constructed not on truth, but on avoidance. This leads directly to one of Jung's most radical realizations. Many of the thoughts, feelings, and desires we believe are our own don't actually originate with us. They're shaped by deeper, inherited psychological structures Jung called the collective unconscious. Beneath our personal memories and experiences lies a shared layer of the psyche, an invisible blueprint that organizes human behavior across cultures and generations. It contains universal patterns Jung called archetypes: the mother, the hero, the rebel, the lover, the trickster, the wise elder, and many more. These archetypes shape how we see the world and how we behave, often without our awareness. Think of friendships where certain roles seem to form naturally: the rescuer, the victim, the comic, the caretaker, the advisor. These roles feel like personality traits, but Jung suggested they're not personal at all. They're collective scripts we unconsciously step into, driven by archetypal forces that make us behave in ways that are ancient, not individual. People don't just connect based on personal chemistry. They unconsciously seek out others who fulfill complementary archetypal roles. The helper finds the helpless. The leader attracts the follower. That's why friend groups, no matter how different their members seem, often fall into similar dynamics. Someone becomes the scapegoat, another the peacemaker, another the rebel. These roles aren't chosen. They emerge, and when stress hits, whether in relationships, communities, or entire societies, people revert even more strongly to archetypal behavior. The pressure of uncertainty drives them to what feels safe and familiar, even if it's not authentic. Jung observed this on a cultural scale. During times of upheaval, individuality is often replaced by conformity. People start speaking the same way, adopting the same beliefs, and responding with the same emotional intensity. They may think they're acting independently, but they're being pulled by powerful collective forces. This phenomenon, which Jung called psychological inflation, causes people to lose touch with their personal identity and become absorbed into group archetypes. The romantic lover becomes consumed by obsession. The social activist loses nuance and sees only enemies. The caretaker forgets themselves entirely in the service of others. These roles provide a sense of identity, but they also erase true individuality. In friendships, archetypal possession shows up as predictable dynamics: the advice giver who never shares their own problems, the eternal child who always needs saving, the responsible one who never allows themselves to be vulnerable. These aren't choices. They're patterns playing out through the collective unconscious, and they're reinforced by cultural expectations. Different societies and generations carry their own collective complexes, shared emotional patterns that shape how people think and act. What seems like personality may just be the psychological signature of the culture someone belongs to. This explains why so many friendships feel both familiar and unsatisfying. We're not relating to real people, we're relating to roles. The fun friend, the wise friend, the strong friend, these are archetypes, not identities. They allow us to function together, but they prevent us from truly knowing each other. We can spend years with someone and still never see beyond the mask they wear, or the one we expect them to maintain. The collective unconscious is most dangerous when it remains unconscious. When we don't realize that we're acting out inherited scripts, we believe our choices are personal and our identities are self-made. But we're being pulled by invisible forces that shape everything from how we love to how we argue. This unconscious conformity is what makes true connection so rare. Until we become aware of these deeper patterns, we'll continue mistaking archetypes for authenticity and confusing performance for love. Jung's insight was both sobering and liberating. It showed how little of our inner world is truly ours, but also pointed the way to reclaim it. The more we understand our shadows, our personas, and our archetypes, the more we can begin to act from a place of conscious choice rather than unconscious repetition. And only then can we start building relationships that are not just meaningful, but real. We often believe we're connecting with others in a personal, conscious way, but beneath the surface, it's usually something else entirely. Most of what we consider our own choices, desires, and preferences are shaped not by individual agency, but by invisible psychological forces that Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. It influences how we behave, what we want, and how we relate, particularly in friendships and intimate relationships. We think we're forming bonds based on personal compatibility, but more often we're responding to archetypal roles and patterns handed down through history. This is why so many friendships follow eerily predictable stages. The initial spark of connection, the honeymoon phase, growing tension, eventual disappointment, and sometimes collapse. These cycles don't simply emerge from personality clashes. They are the result of unconscious roles playing out. The rescuer, the victim, the leader, the rebel, cast not by intention, but by forces beyond awareness. And so we choose people not necessarily because we see who they are, but because they fit something in us, something we haven't fully understood. Jung believed that becoming conscious of these collective patterns is essential. The goal isn't to reject them. Archetypes are a natural part of being human, but to recognize when they're operating and choose how to respond. Without this awareness, we live out scripts we didn't write, mistaking them for authenticity. We perform roles assigned by culture, family, or the era we live in, never realizing that the personality we present may be little more than a mask built from collective patterns. This realization changes how we view relationships. Most friendships are shaped more by mutual archetypal roles than genuine personal connection. They might feel meaningful, but underneath, they're often the result of two unconscious systems responding to each other. Authentic friendship, true, deep connection, requires a conscious act, seeing and being seen beyond these inherited roles. That's rare, and that's why such relationships feel so sacred when they do occur. It means stepping outside of collective sleepwalking, confronting the archetypes shaping us, and relating not as characters in a psychological play, but as real individuals. But even deeper than the collective unconscious is another mechanism that undermines our ability to truly connect: projection. Jung discovered that we don't see people as they are. We see them filtered through the lens of our own unresolved inner world. We cast out the parts of ourselves we can't accept, our flaws, unmet needs, unacknowledged strengths, and project them onto others. Then we react to those projections as if they're real, unaware that we're looking at our own reflection. This is why so many friendships are shaped not by who the other person is, but by who we unconsciously need them to be. The friend who seems selfish might be reflecting our own suppressed needs. The person who irritates us with their emotional intensity might be carrying our disowned vulnerability. The one we idolize for their courage or creativity might be a stand-in for our own unexplored potential. We experience attraction, irritation, love, or judgment, but these emotions often have more to do with what's unintegrated within us than with the other person. Projection doesn't just shape conflict, it also distorts intimacy. It creates fantasy relationships that feel vivid and real, but are actually built on illusion. And when the projection breaks, when the person fails to live up to our internal script, we often feel betrayed or disappointed. But they haven't changed. We've just stopped seeing them through our fantasy. The emotional intensity of our reactions is often the biggest clue that projection is at play. When we're unusually angry, captivated, or disturbed by someone, we're likely seeing a reflection of something within ourselves. Jung emphasized that projection is not a flaw, it's part of how the unconscious attempts to become conscious. The people who provoke the strongest reactions in us are often mirrors showing us something we haven't yet owned. But until we're able to recognize this, we can't truly help others, support them, or even love them, because we're not relating to them. We're relating to a version of them built from our own internal struggles. This distortion doesn't just happen individually, it happens collectively. Friendship groups unconsciously assign roles to members: the dependable one, the rebel, the victim. These roles serve the group's unspoken psychological needs and keep the dynamics predictable. But they also trap people in identities that don't reflect their full humanity. The most unsettling truth Jung revealed is that authentic empathy, truly understanding and responding to another person's emotional reality, is almost impossible as long as we're projecting. What we often call empathy is just emotional projection, assuming others feel what we would feel in their place. But that isn't empathy, it's a form of control. Real empathy demands that we separate our feelings from theirs, and that's incredibly hard to do when we're unaware of what we're projecting. Recognizing projection is psychologically difficult because it forces us to confront aspects of ourselves we've long disowned. It's especially painful when the projections are positive, when we've idealized someone for qualities we haven't cultivated in ourselves. Giving up the fantasy feels like a loss. We have to reclaim the energy we've invested in someone else's supposed brilliance, stability, or confidence, and redirect it toward our own development. Jung saw projection as a bridge. What we throw onto others is often what is trying to come into consciousness. The person we admire for their independence might be reflecting our own emerging need for freedom. The one who triggers our anger might be pointing us toward our own capacity for boundaries and self-respect. If we're willing to examine these reactions, relationships become mirrors, not of who others are, but of who we are trying to become. This changes everything. Instead of blaming others for conflict, confusion, or disappointment, we ask, "What is this revealing about me?" That doesn't mean we excuse bad behavior or ignore harm. It means we take responsibility for our inner world before we interpret someone else's. And this leads to the most haunting question Jung left us with. If we've spent our lives projecting our inner world onto others, how many relationships have we actually had? If our friends are doing the same, seeing us through their projections rather than as we are, then who is truly seeing anyone? Most of us are surrounded by people but still feel alone, trapped in a maze of psychological reflections. Genuine friendship, then, is less about finding the right person and more about doing the inner work to clear the lens, so that when we do see someone, we see them not as a role, not as a mirror, but as they truly are. And maybe, just maybe, they'll see us too.